And I hope you had a chance to look through these 2 chapters and get thoroughly confused before the class. All right, so let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. All right, so as we begin, just going to introduce myself. I'm Steve Sheik. I'm the rabbi and congregation leader at Tree of Life Messianic Congregation in Katy, Texas. And I want to welcome everyone here tonight who's here live, and also those who are going to catch us later on, because I do know that there are people that tell me that, yeah, they are, they like to look at it later on when they have a chance. So, all right. So we want to also, I guess, Juliet, you're new to our class. I want to welcome you here tonight. And,
hi, thank you so much. Happy to join.
Good. And you're from locally here in Houston, or?
Yes, we moved here. We moved to Katy last December.
Okay. Okay.
But from the Houston area. So.
Okay. Well, good. Then I can maybe expect to see you at Tree of Life one of these days.
Yes.
Okay. Good. All right. Let's go ahead and begin with the lesson here. Of course, our very first slides are always my maps, and so that you have an idea of where all of this stuff is taking place. And here's a timeline. I always like to have timelines because I get confused. Was this before the Cubs won the World Series or after? So and then the book of this kind of tells you where we are right now. We are going to finish up chapter 11 tonight, and that's the condemnation of Jerusalem and Israel for their idolatry. And so then now, and this again, for reference purposes, this is the plan view of Solomon's temple, and it was quite the thing. Let's see. It was all coated, covered in gold, and it was like the ninth wonder of the world or something at that time. So here's what it would have, an artist representation of what it might have been. I think he got his lavers a little bit too big, king size lavers, because judging from these steps, a man would only be about this size right here. If you can see my cursor on the door, and also again, artist representation of what this would look like. There's no biblical view that has this outer wall around there. There was just the this wall here. Okay. And so it doesn't really matter. That's not something that we need to even worry about. Okay, then looking at chapter 10, verse 1 through 2. Then I looked, and behold, above the expanse, over the heads of the cherubim, there appeared above them something like a sapphire stone, resembling a throne. He spoke to the man clothed in linen and said, "Go in between the whirling wheels underneath the cherubim, and fill your hands with glowing coals from between the cherubim, and scatter them over the city." So he went in before my eyes. Ezekiel saw this, and he's still in the temple episode. It's just a new act in this play of that he was brought from the Chebar. I looked it up today as to how to pronounce it, and I pulled up 4 different things, and they pronounced it all differently. So you pick and choose, however you want to say Chebar, K-bar, chocolate bar, I don't care. Okay, the cherubim, when they talk about cherubim, probably comes from an Akkadian word, karabu, and it means to intercede or to be gracious or to bless. So that's something that comes from some PH deity, not from me. And so, over the heads of the cherubim, he saw this throne like chariot, or a chariot like throne. I don't know really how to describe that. Neither did he when he actually saw it. But he said that it resembled sapphire in its color and its beauty. And in excuse me, chapter 1:26 said the throne, chariot throne, whatever, it resembled lapis lazuli. And that's another expensive blue stone. And the color, that color blue, has long been associated with heaven and heavenly things. And so this he spoke to the man, and so this he would have been who was sitting on the throne. That would have been Adonai. That'd be God. And so Ezekiel saw the Lord instruct the man who was dressed in linen to go in among all those whirling wheels. And I don't know how hazardous that appeared to him, but it was all fire under there anyway. So I mean, that's just another hazard. And he said to collect coals of fire. And so he was to scatter these coals over the city. Now, these coals were not going to be what you would call cleansing or purifying coals. You remember when Isaiah was called to be a prophet, and he said, I'm a man of unclean lips. And so an angel took a coal of fire off the altar and touched his lips, and that straightened him right up with his unclean lips. It was a cleansing coal. And my mother always used a bar of soap for a cleansing for my tongue. And these coals, though, were to be coals of destruction, fire of destruction, rather than a cleansing coal. And so he was to scatter those coals over the city, and that would have symbolized the judgment and the cleansing of the city, because why? It's wiped clean. And so the man obeyed as the prophet watched. All right. So also, those of you that are new, we have a way to do this class, and that is, if you have something to say, just unmute yourself and say it. Or you can put up your hand on there, and I might see it, but the best way to do it is just unmute yourself and says, "Hey, I got something to say." All right. So we've got a picture of sapphire right here. These are raw sapphire here, just kind of like out of the ground, and they knocked the dirt off of it. But that's what it would look like after you mine a sapphire. And then, of course, this is after it goes to the jeweler, and he cleans it all up and so forth. The British royalty are very fond of sapphire. And so I could have taken lots of pictures of all of the ladies in the British royalty with their sapphires. But I think this picture here gives it a little bit better representation of what the color would have really been. Now, what we got here is some artist representations of what it was that Ezekiel was looking at. And again, these are just artists' representations. There's really nothing that you can point to in the Bible. There's no picture book Bible. Okay, it didn't come with illustrations. And so here's one guy's look at it, and he's got a little throne chair with these things here. And here's another guy here who's this guy here that I'm pointing at here on the right. He's the director of antiquities for some organization, a biblical organization. And then here's another one of the Lord's glory departing from the temple, and we'll see that later on in the 11th verse. And then, of course, we have, the Dutch masters and the Italian masters and so forth, Raphael, with his view of it. And it's nice and pretty, but it's very biblically inaccurate, as many of those were in the day. All right, any comments or questions? So let's go ahead. Now the cherubim stood on the right side of the house when the man went in. The cloud filled the inner court. Then the glory of Adonai rose up from the cherub into the threshold of the house. The house was filled with the cloud, and the court was full of the brilliance of Adonai's glory. The sound of the wings of the cherubim was heard as far as the outer court, as the voice of El Shaddai when he speaks. So the temple, it faced east, and so Ezekiel explained that in his vision, the cherubim were positioned on the right side or the south side of the temple building and looking east. So that's if he was right over the top of the temple and looking east toward the sunrise. These cherubim would have been over there on the right hand side, obviously the south side. The south side of the temple was the closest to the city, and this cloud symbolizes God's presence. And I looked at that as what did they have in the wilderness but God's presence, that pillar, that cloud for the daylight, and then the pillar of fire by night. And so that had long been associated with God's presence, is this cloud. And it covered that whole inner courtyard of the temple where the cherubim stood. And the sound of fluttering wings, it says, were like the voice of Adonai. And it actually said the voice of El Shaddai. And that's a different kind of sound. El Shaddai is the nurturing God. Okay, that's it's all often translated as the God Almighty or something like that. But the actual word El Shaddai is the nurturing God. It comes from if you break the Hebrew word down, the shad is the breast, and so the nurturing side of God. Okay, and so the that part of the fluttering wings, it said it was like the voice of Adonai, but much different than the voice in the wilderness, in Mount Sinai, because now that was so big and so scary that the people just fell down and they were not able to they just couldn't handle it. They told Moses, no, you go talk to him. We can't do it. And so this was possibly a little bit different, maybe a great deal different than what God was sounding like in Mount Sinai. So the presence of the Lord was, it lifted up and it was there. And so it was his glorious, he's going to depart here shortly, and yet his glory was not diminished whatsoever as he stood in this doorway. And so the prophet saw the glory of the Lord. Perhaps it was a personified, to where he could actually see something that looked like what he might have thought of, that would have, looked like what God would look like. And, obviously he's not going to see God in all of his glory, because he cannot, because God says no man can see God and live. So he would have seen something less than all of God in all of his glory, but perhaps something that he could actually look at and tell what it was. And so it stood in the temple building. And so God moved then, the cloud represented his glory, and it filled all the temple and all of the courtyard, and the sound of the cherubim's wings all of this, would have been just a fantastic vision. And it's just, the voice of God coming out of this is just incredible. So again, I can't describe it. And even Ezekiel couldn't really describe it adequately. So me, second, third, fourth time, fourth hand down here, I can't even come close. Let's go ahead with verse 6. After he commanded the man in the clothed in linen, saying, take fire from between the whirling wheels, from between the cherubim, he went in and stood beside a wheel, and the cherub reached out his hand from beneath the cherubim into the fire that was between the cherubim and took some of it. He put it into the hands of the man clothed in linen. He took it and went out. The cherubim appeared to have the form of a human hand under their wings. So the man dressed in linen, he entered among the wheels. You have these four wheels, so the wheels within a wheels. And when I see that wheel within a wheel, I think of, and I think I've got it in my notes later on, I think of like a gyroscope, where it's spinning. This is spinning one way and the other is spinning the other way. And so it allows, it makes for stability. And so he went down into there, but he didn't reach out and get the coals. The cherub, one of the cherubs, reached down and got the coals and put it in his hand. And so Ezekiel was he was astounded at this business of the cherub having hands under those wings and so forth. And he mentioned it like two more times and the cherub had wings. That reminds me of when our our grandson, who back in 2009, he drowned. And miraculously, the Lord brought him back to us. And he later told us what he saw in heaven. And one day we were up there, and he grabbed my wife and he says, Grandma, they have feet. And she says, what? And he just grabbed her face like this, and says, Grandma, they have feet. And she said, what are you talking about? They have feet. And he said, well, the angels have feet because we jumped in mud puddles together. And so he was struck by the fact that all he'd ever seen was these angels, in the pictures, and they don't have feet. They just got these long flowing gowns and stuff. And he was struck by the fact that angels had feet. Well, Ezekiel was struck by the fact that the cherubim had hands, human hands. So that was really interesting for him. So we see that, the man in linen, he took the coals and he went away. And so we're just to assume that he went and did what the Lord told him to do. He did not report back as he did in chapter 9. So any comments or questions so far? Okay, then I looked, and behold, four wheels beside the cherubim, one wheel beside one cherub, and another wheel and beside another cherub. The appearance of the wheels was like the sparkling of a beryl stone. As for their appearance, the four had one form, like a wheel within a wheel. And they, when they went, they would go in any of their four directions without pivoting as they went. So to whatever place the face headed, they followed without turning as they went. So this is called, these verses from 9 to 22 is called a literary echo, or echo literary strategy. It's a literary form that PhDs look at all the time. And but for me, what it means is that it looks back at chapter 1 and verses 6 through 21, and he's basically telling the same story again, or the same same vision again, or coming back to the same characters, describing the same characters once again. So again, Ezekiel saw the wheels beside the cherubim, one wheel beside another of the 4 cherubim. And this time, though, he compared the wheels to Tarshish. Okay, now that is literally Tarshish is refinery stone and in appearance. So what in the world is that? It's a lot of the scholars say that it is probably beryl. And if you did not know what beryl is, well, then I'm going to show you in just a second. And we really don't know for sure what it is, but that's just kind of what they're guessing. It was obviously expensive and beautiful. And Tarshish was probably modern Spain, or at least a part of it. That's what they say. And so this description identifies the stones by their quality or their place of origin. And the secondary vertical wheels evidently intersected the primary wheels and again made these wheels be able to move in whatever direction. Now, the engineer in me looks at that and says, how does that work? And I can't figure it out. But anyway, here's beryl stone. And I found that beryl, for the most part, when you speak of beryl, it's kind of a greenish stone or aquamarine, even to blue. But there are other colors of the beryl, just depending on what minute minerals the composition of the beryl stone would be. But it's certainly a very, very beautiful stone. So going ahead, their whole body, their backs, their hands, their wings, their wheels, and the wheels of the 4 of them were full of eyes all around. As for the wheels, they were called, in my hearing, the whirling wheels. Each one had 4 faces. The first face was the face of the cherub. The second face was the face of a man. The third, the face of a lion, and fourth, the face of an eagle. Now, the eyes covering the cherubim and the wheels, that symbolize the great perception that and knowledge that these beings had. And Ezekiel heard the wheels called whirling, and the Hebrew word, I think, for whirling or whirring sound is gagal, and it means kind of rotating, rolling, revolving. And I was trying to think of it today. I wonder, in that time frame that we're talking about in Ezekiel, what kind of wheels turning did they have? Because the only wheel that I would, maybe a grinding wheel perhaps, but certainly they had no bearings. They would have had chariots. And how did they keep them lubricated, or how was it? It was probably very primitive compared to what we would have today, but today with bearings and bushings and so forth, you can take a wheel like a bicycle wheel. Think of a bicycle wheel when you were a kid. You turn the bicycle upside down, and I don't know how many of y'all ever did that, but a lot of us did, to whirl that wheel around and mess with it, and eventually get your finger stuck in there and smack your finger and or get yourself wrapped up in the chain of it. But that's, to me, is that front wheel whirling. You could, that's what Ezekiel was experiencing there. And the faces, this time, each of the cherubim had 4 faces: the faces of a cherub, a man, a lion, and an eagle. Remember that the first vision he had back in chapter 1, the faces were an ox, a man, a lion, and an eagle. This one is different. The the cherub appeared evidently to some people say, well, the cherub appeared more like a bull than something else. And this would, in some ways, would mesh with ancient Near East view that the art of winged bulls and lions with human or bird heads and so forth. So that was a common picture that people would have recognized. But the ancients probably chose those symbols of combined human and animal creatures to represent characteristics in similar terms to communicate that these angelic servants possess these same kind of characteristics. So we don't really know the difference of why that this time it was a cherub. What does a cherub look like? And so that's just kind of open to speculation. I read, I don't even know how many commentaries on this, just as one verse alone, about what the cherub, what did it look like? What does a cherub look like? And I can pretty well tell you that it does not look like the naked baby with the little bow and arrow that we see on Valentine's Day. And so if anybody got a comment on that, hey, I'll listen to that one. You got a comment on what a cherub looks like and why it's this time, why it was a cherub and not an ox or a bull?
Well, we don't know now, but we will know one day.
There you go. There you go, Carmen. Good. Rich.
Yes, both the ox and the cherub were dedicated to God's purposes. These were entities that served God.
Okay. The cherub actually, we don't know exactly what it would look like, but the cherub was a very familiar figure all throughout the tabernacle, because you had the draperies were supposed to be embroidered with a cherub, and so they had some kind of a concept back in those days as to what a cherub would have looked like. So let me see. So, and we don't really know today. We've got like I said, we've got our little ideas as to what a cherub might have looked like, but it wasn't particularly. Maybe not, and whether or not it looked like a bull, I personally would not like to think of a cherub with a cow's snout out there. That just doesn't do it for me. And having been around some cows a time or two in my life, so I don't think I would want that to be one of them. So anyway, going ahead, because we're never going to get through this. I've got a little chart here that I drew up of the difference between the cherubim on the ark. There were two, and the ones in Ezekiel's vision, there were four. The cherubim on the ark had two wings that they covered over the mercy seat. In Ezekiel's vision, they had, of course, the four wings. Two they flew with, and two they covered their body with. And the number of heads, of course, the one on the Ark of the Covenant was just one head, and then the others had four. And we don't know about the form of the head on the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. It doesn't tell us. It's just kind of always assumed that it would be a human head. But of course, in Ezekiel's vision, it's an eagle, a bull, a lion, or a human, or an eagle, cherub, lion, or human. And the location, of course, the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem is where the Ark of the Covenant would have been. And Ezekiel's vision, he saw them first on the Chebar River or canal over in Babylon. And then, of course, then they brought him back and he saw the cherubim again in Jerusalem. And the status of it, that word status, I would think of maybe more the mobility of the mobility of the cherubim. The ones in the ark, they were static. They stayed right there. They didn't move. And then, of course, these other ones, they were infinitely mobile. They could just hover, they up, down, sideways, but they didn't turn. Okay, he said that just whatever direction their face was going, they would move that direction. But obviously, to him, they did not turn like a person would turn, or a cart would turn, or a chariot would turn. It could go in any direction. And so as then the function of the cherubim, one was just to be the bearer of the invisible throne of God, there over the mercy seat, because it said God dwelt over the top of the mercy seat. And now this one, that would have been invisible, whereas this was an actual visible throne up above these cherubim and their all of their wheels. So anyway, that's a chart. Anyway, so whatever you think. Okay, so going ahead, the cherubim arose. These were like the living creatures that I saw by the river Chebar. As the cherubim went, the wheels would go beside them. When the cherubim lifted up their wings to rise from the earth, the wheels would not turn from beside them. When they stood up, these stood still. And when they rose up, these rose up with them, for the spirit of the living creatures was in them. All right, now that is really, to me, interesting. Ezekiel saw the same, these are the same cherubim, just, so that everybody knows that, yes, these were the same cherubim that he had seen over on the river Chebar. And so, he saw them rise up, then move, and the wheels beside them stayed right there beside them. And when they stood, it's like the wheels would stand right there with them. They weren't moving around. And so the spirit of the cherubim actually extended to the wheels, so that they were almost like they were so connected with the wheels, and that was so connected to the spirit and the glory of God that they all moved in one in just one smooth motion of glory, actually. And so whatever these creatures did is just God commanded, and they did it. And how would that be for us if we could be that close to God's glory and to be that in tune with the Holy Spirit, that whatever direction that the Holy Spirit asks us to go and do and be, we could just move in the flow of the Spirit without being cranky like me and saying, I don't really want to do that. I want to do something else. But we see that this particular vision that Ezekiel had, these guys were very attuned to what God wanted them to do, and they were doing it, and they moved. The wheels moved just like the cherubim wanted them to. There was no hesitation, no false starts, no course corrections, or anything like that. So any comments or questions? Going ahead. Check my time here. 18th verse. Then the glory of Adonai went forth from above the threshold of the house and stood above the cherubim, and the cherubim lifted up their wings and arose from the earth in my sight. When they went out, the wheels went with them. They stood still at the door of the east gate of Adonai's house. The glory of God of Israel was over them from above. They were the living creatures that I saw under the God of Israel by the Chebar, river Chebar. I knew that they were cherubim. And so Ezekiel, he saw he saw God move from the front door of the temple to a position above the cherubim. Okay, so they were to the side. Then he moved to a position above the cherubim, and they were supporting this platform on which this throne, slant, chariot, whatever it was, rested. And so the Lord was mounting. He was going up on his throne, slant, chariot, and the cherubim then would carry him out, and he would ride out of the temple and the city. So the cherubim taxied God in this throne chariot to a position above the eastern gate of the temple. And so this is the main entrance into the temple courtyards from the outside world. The Lord in all of his glory and the cherubim then hovered over that gate. And God warned his people that, he would remove his presence from them if they departed from his will. And so one of the greatest blessings that we as believers enjoy is that God he's promised never to leave us nor forsake us. And so that was again, God is not going to leave us. He's not going to forsake us. This idea that as many of you know, I don't teach or preach eternal security, that if once you accepted the Lord, nothing can ever cause you to be away from, that you would lose your salvation. No, there's nothing that no man or anything else can take you away from God. The only way that you could lose that is if you walk away yourself and you decided, I don't want to have anything to do with God. That's another lesson for another day, but I can show you many scriptures of that, even in Revelation, where he told the churches, you have to repent or your name will be blotted out of the book. And that tells me that their name was in the book, or it couldn't be blotted out. They were saved, but then if they didn't repent and get back to God, then they would be blotted out. So anyway, like I said, that's a whole teaching for another day. And so we're going to go on through this. So Ezekiel again explained that these are the same cherubim that he had seen before, and he called them living beings in that other vision. And so why didn't he call them cherubim at that point? We don't know. Perhaps this when he finally connected them with Solomon's temple, then that's when he finally said, these are cherubim. Okay, I know these figures. I knew where I'd seen them before. And so here he was he says, now I know that these were cherubim. And so I think that's probably what it was. He associated them finally with the temple. Before, it was just a glorious vision that he had seen, and it was overwhelming, overpowering, something that he could not adequately describe. But then once he sees them in relation to the temple, he said, aha, that's what those are. Those are actual living being cherubim, which up to that point, all he had ever seen were the representations of them. He would not have even been able to see the Holy of Holies, inside the Holy of Holies, to the ark, because remember, he was only 30 years old when his vision started, when he was called. So he was not yet a priest. All he would be able to do is just help out in the temple. He was not ordained and set aside as a priest at that time. And so all he had seen was the draperies inside, the wall hangings and so forth, with the embroidered cherubim on there. And now he's actually seen living, breathing, fiery cherubim, And so that's where he says, yes, indeed, that's a cherubim. So going ahead, each of these had 4 faces and each one 4 wings. The appearance of human hands was under their wings. Again, he mentioned that hands under the wings. They have hands. And as for the appearance of their faces, they were the same faces whose appearance I saw by the river Chebar. Each one could move in the direction of any of its faces. And he just, that whole idea of the motion, how it would move, just fascinated him. Now, the faces were the same faces that he saw in in chapter 1, with the exception we've already talked about, the bull and the cherub face. But let me get that. So anyway, this one had a face of a cherub instead of an ox. And so again, I asked the question, what does a cherub look like? And we don't really know what a cherub looked like, but it being as how these things were at the kind of the hierarchy, the upper level, upper echelon of angelic beings, they were, I would imagine, they're pretty fearsome and awesome looking, and not the sweet little naked babies. Okay. That's fine for Hallmark, but it does not do anything for me. So we'll just leave it at that. Okay, let's go on. Any comments or questions as we close out that chapter?
I was
Hey,
just
Carl?
wondering if you identified these as the same 4 living creatures as in Revelation, because they're using the same terminology.
I believe that it possibly is, and there may be differences in their description by John the Revelator as opposed to Ezekiel, because each one of them has his own visions, but it could very well be the same four entities. It could very well be. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised. I would be more surprised if it wasn't. Let's say it that way. But that's just me. I can't prove it one way or the other. Okay, then let's go on with chapter 11. I got 15 minutes. When the Ruach lifted me up and brought me to the eastern gate of Adonai's house facing east, behold, at the door of the gate were 25 men. I saw among them Jezaniah, son of Azur, and Pelatiah, son of Benaiah, leaders of the people. Now, could be, this being being lifted up, where Ezekiel is lifted up and placed in another place. Okay, that is the end of that act of chapter 10, and now he's in act whatever of chapter 11. He's moved to a different place, and so we see these 25 men who were worshiping the sun, possibly same guys that were worshiping the sun before, but there's the problem of in chapter 8 and 9 where the executioners were supposed to go through and start right there and execute everyone who was worshiping idols. And so were these guys executed that at that time, or what? Or this is another 25 men? We don't know. And the Bible does not, Ezekiel does not describe their activities. He doesn't tell us what they were doing. Now, Ezekiel identified, he recognized Jezaniah and Pelatiah, who had been somewhere. He knew them from Jerusalem. He had been in captivity 5 years, but he knew these guys, actually a little over 6 years now, but he knew these guys. Now, this was not the Jezaniah that we'd talked to, the son of Chebar. This was a different guy, okay? And these names that they had were very popular names during that time, and Pelotai was a popular name. Benaiah was also a popular name. So there's lots of it's like in the time of Yeshua, there were Yochanans everywhere, as well as Shimon. That was another popular name, Simon Peter, and so forth. So they're very popular names. So, but we know for sure that these guys were not the two that he had talked about earlier that had been in that anteroom of the temple, looking at or worshiping those idols. They were of the elders. Okay, so these were different people. They had risen to prominence after the first deportation. It just left a big power vacuum in Jerusalem, and so these guys rose to power, and they were basically they were kind of the new kids on the block. They were not they normally would not have been in the corridors of power had there not been that deportation of all of the actual leaders. So these guys now elevated themselves, or somehow got elevated into these positions. And he said to me, "Son of man, these are the men that devise sin and give wicked counsel in this city, who say, this is not the time to build houses. This city is the cooking pot, and we are the meat. Therefore prophesy against them, prophesy, son of man." So now that's some interesting imagery there. All right. And so we're going to try to unravel that a little bit. The Lord told Ezekiel that these men were those that were planning wickedness and giving bad advice to the residents of Jerusalem. This is an indictment from the Lord himself. So these men devise, and they're sitting around thinking up sins that they could do, and they give bad counsel to everybody. They tell other people to do bad things too. They're encouraging the people, and so to do bad things. So they're really not good people. This idea that it's not time to build houses. So what that is a little confusing, okay? Because now I'd looked at again, when I do these things, I look at least a half a dozen different commentaries, and well, more likely a dozen or so, to prepare for these. And it was a little different. Some of the people look at that, and I tried looking at the Hebrew, and I couldn't quite figure it out myself. Not the time to build houses. And part of it was possibly they're telling people, no, we don't need to expand. Everything's okay. We're good. And they had, they're not going to build any new houses, because why? They had moved into the houses of the exiles. They had taken over their properties, and they just moved right on up. It would be like government officials, all of a sudden they were gone, and so some people just moved right into their houses. And so these guys they had taken the houses of the exiles, perhaps, and that's kind of what that means. It's not the time to build houses. We don't have to build houses. We've got these. And so possibly the other commentators are saying, no, they were actually telling people that this is a time to build houses and plan on living in Jerusalem because we're secure. Maybe it was not a time to be building houses because we need to prepare for battle. And so it's a little confusing what those verses actually do mean. Either interpretation is possible, because the unbelieving leadership in Jerusalem was advising both courses of action. So some of them were saying, yeah, build up and we're going to, and others were saying, no, don't build up because we got to fight. And so to make sure that all your efforts are toward getting ready for for the battle. And so the true prophets, actually like Jeremiah, told the people to submit to the Babylonians. Go ahead and surrender, because this is what you're going to do anyway. If you surrender, you might live. If you don't surrender, you're going to die, period. And Jeremiah wrote the exiles in Babylon, and he told them, go ahead and build houses. You're going to be there a while. Just go ahead and settle down in your captivity. You're going to be there a while. And so these wicked leaders, then, they were comparing the people of Jerusalem. One way of looking at it, they were preparing the people of Jerusalem to meat or flesh in a clay cooking pot. They were saying that the people were secure in the city, even though they were uncomfortably hot. As the kettle is in the fire. The fire's outside, and they're in the kettle, and so they're safe in the kettle. But even though it's hot, and they thought the walls, the fortifications of Jerusalem, we are good. They can't beat us, and so we'll just wait it out. We got water, we got food, and which they really didn't. They had water, but they had no food, and they eventually went down into cannibalism and so forth. So another view of these men was that they considered themselves to be the choice meat, as it were. And so again, you can look at both of these. It's a little enigmatic. No, it's a lot enigmatic in some of these cases. And so we don't really know exactly which way he's going here, and different scholars have different ideas on the thing. So, but going ahead, in 5:7, then the Ruach Adonai fell on me and said, speak. Thus Adonai said, so you are thinking, house of Israel, for I know the thoughts that come into your mind. You have multiplied your slain in the city, and you fill the streets with corpses. Therefore it says, thus says Adonai Elohim, your corpses you have laid in the midst of it, and they are the meat, and this city is the cooking pot, but I will bring you out of it. So the Spirit came on, sorry about that. The Spirit came on Ezekiel, and he instructed him to tell these people that the Lord knew what they're talking about, what they're thinking. He knows all of their thoughts, and that they were thinking that this rebellion, their thinking was that they were rebelling against him and Jeremiah and everything that the prophets had told them to do. And they actually had slain a lot of people in Jerusalem by corrupt government, corrupt justice, and taking advantage of the weak people. And they thought they were going to be safe, but God said, nope, I'm going to pull you out of here, and you are going to be judged. And so he said, you feared the sword, so I will bring the sword against you. It is the declaration of Adonai Elohim. I will bring you out of the midst of it, give you into the hands of strangers, and execute judgments against you. You will fall by the sword. I will judge you at the border of Israel, so you will know that I am Adonai. So here God is saying it right there. Said, this judgment is coming. You feared the sword. You feared that. That's the very thing that I'm going to bring against you. If they'd feared spiders and snakes, maybe he would have brought that too. But they were fearful of the army of Babylon, and God said, that's exactly what your judgment is going to be, is that sword. And so he said they will be brought out of Jerusalem, that they will be plucked out of the safety of Jerusalem and slain. The wicked will not survive. Remember the ones that took the mark, the Tav. They're the ones, they're going to be exiled, or they have already been exiled, and they are, because now there was another deportation after the temple fell, but the ones who were exiled were the ones that were actually saved. There were a few that escaped and made it down to Egypt, but for the most part, judgment fell on Jerusalem and left it empty with the surrounding area too. So the city will not be your cooking pot, nor will you be the meat in the midst of it. I will judge you at Israel's borders, so that you will know that I am Adonai, whose laws you did not follow and whose ordinances you did not obey. Instead, you have acted in accord with the ordinance of the nations around you. As I prophesied, Pelatiah, and Ezekiel then says, as I prophesied, Pelatiah, son of Benaiah, dropped dead. I fell on my face and cried out with a loud voice and said, Adonai, are you going to completely eradicate the remnant of Israel? So this is saying there is not going to be any safety in Jerusalem. The judgment is coming. There's nothing you can do about it. And their own actions of idolatry and their wickedness and all of the things that they have done are exactly what they're going to be punished for and in. Remember when the children of Israel were entering into Canaan, and they stood on the two mountains and shouted back the blessings and cursings. These curses are exactly what is happening to Israel at this point, because they were disobeying God. As a sign, then Pelatiah died, and Ezekiel, wow, he's stressed out, and he says, are you going to kill everybody? And the word of the Lord Adonai came to me, saying, Son of man, as for your kinsmen, fellow exiles, and the whole house of Israel, all of them are those about whom the inhabitants of Israel said, keep far away from Adonai. This land has been given to us for a possession. So the Lord, then he replied that many of the Jews in Jerusalem were saying that it's those guys that are in exile, those ones that have been taken into captivity, those are the ones that God is judging. And they believe that the Jews that were left in Jerusalem, they were the remnant that God would preserve and bless. They had it exactly wrong, just completely backwards. And so what happened is that it was the exiles that would be the remnant that would be saved, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem would be killed. And so I think that I could teach another lesson on the things that came out of the Babylonian captivity. The reforms that came out of the exile were proof that the people that were in exile. There was Daniel and his three companions, and Ezra, Nehemiah. These were godly people that were taken captive, and so as a result, they got together. They reformed what their thoughts of the Bible and the Torah should be, and got back to what God had told them they should be. And so, and like I said, I could go in greater detail on that. Maybe I will one of these days. But out of that came the synagogue system, and I think maybe I don't know if I said that, not yet. But they came up with the synagogue system with a concept of a Beit Din, a house of judgment, to judge their affairs. Then the schooling, that each place would have been a house of prayer and school, so that before everything was centered in Jerusalem, and now it's going to be scattered out, decentralized, so that people would have more access to Torah teaching and to good instruction. And all of that came out of the Babylonian captivity. And also as a result of that, the people felt closer to God that way, because they could go to their local synagogue, read the Torah. The Levites were there to counsel them and teach them and lead them. And so Idolatry was never a big problem to Israel after the captivity. That problem went away, and of course they had other problems, but they did reform, and it just shows that the people who were exiled were the godly ones. So sometimes when things happen to you, it's not because it's you failed or you messed up. It's because God's pulling you out of a place that's gonna come under judgment, or he's pulling you out of a place that is not safe for you. And you just wonder about it. I can tell you stories of living in foreign countries where people wanted at one point we were going to take a tour into Costa Rica, and I said, I just one night, and we were just supposed to leave like the next day, and so I just had this I don't know, epiphany, dream, whatever you want to call it, middle of the night. Do not go. Do not go. And so I called up a couple of the other men in the group, and I said, oh, I've got this feeling. And they said, so do we. And so I didn't want to say anything, but since you're now saying that you believe that God's telling you do not go, as it turned out, there were other groups that went up there, and they were assaulted by Noriega's men, beaten and robbed, and we were safe. And another time we were going to go to Machu Picchu in Peru, and we said, no, can't go. I'm not going to go. And that very, the train was attacked by Sendero Luminoso, and 3 Americans were killed. And so God protects us. Sometimes you think, why can't I do this? But he protects his own. Okay. Now, Carl said one of the things that happened in the Babylonian captivity was the change from Paleo Hebrew to modern Hebrew. Any idea why they changed the alphabet? I think part of it was a lot of things changed from as a result of being in the commerce system and the education system of Babylon. And so they upgraded to more of a universal thing that people could read rather than the hieroglyphics of Paleo Hebrew. And there were quite a few changes in Babylon that actually turned out to be good changes. Okay, so Suspicious Tim, Costa Rica. No, what I'm talking about was back in 1987, and where we were having the uprising in Panama and all that kind of stuff. So those were some crazies. 87 to 89 from there and on into the invasion of Panama that I was there for. So going ahead, I gotta try to finish this out tonight. Anyway, they I think we've talked about that a good bit. And here God says, although I removed them, though I removed them from far away from the nations, though I scattered them among the countries, yet for a little while I was a sanctuary for them in the countries where they have gone. Therefore say, thus says Adonai Elohim, I will gather you from the peoples and collect you out of the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. When they come here, they will remove all of the detestable things and all of its abominations. And so here, this is what we've talked about. It was the people that were in Babylon that were protected. They actually had a pretty good life. They were allowed to have their own communities, and as long as they behaved themselves, the Babylonian government just really didn't mess with them much. They had their own courts, they had their own cities and their own schools, and so it was a good, actually a good place for them. And when 70 years later, when they were allowed to return, only 20% of the Jews came back to Jerusalem and Israel. The rest of them stayed in Babylon because they had a good gig there. They were prosperous, and they just didn't want to go back and try to be pioneers again in Israel. So yeah, there were some good things that came out of that, actually. And going ahead, I want to finish this out tonight. It says, then I will give them one heart. I will put a new spirit within them. I will remove the heart of stone from their flesh and give them a heart of flesh, and so that they may follow my laws, keep my ordinances, and practice them. They will be my people, and I will be their God. As far as those whose heart walks after the heart of their detestable things and abominations, I will bring their ways on their heads. It is a declaration of Adonai. And we see that when the people did come back, they were changed. They were no longer idolaters. They had, that was it for them. They never went back into idolatry. They had other things. They had other problems, but idolatry was never one of them to any great extent after the Jews returned to Israel. All right, and I'll get behind in my stuff there. Here's where I talked about they developed the synagogue system that had the Beit Din and the Beit Tefillah and teaching and so forth. So the people that were punished were the ones they brought it on themselves, and so. Said, then the cherubim lifted up their wings, the wheels were beside them, the glory of the God of Israel was over them from above. The glory of Adonai went up from within the city and stood still on the mountain that is to the east of the city. The Ruach lifted me and brought me into the vision by the Ruach Elohim to Chaldea, to the exiles. Then the vision that I had seen left me. So I told the exiles all the things that Adonai had shown me. So what we have here, okay, there was that. God's glory left the temple, and it never did return to its prior form in the temple. Remember when he was there under Solomon, and it was so great that the priest could not even stand up and minister. And then now by this time, the Ark of the Covenant, it's either gone or it's soon to be gone and lost forever for anyway, we don't know where it is now. Some people say, yeah, that it exists, and some of us say, no, it doesn't. And we don't know. But it says that this glory paused and settled there for a second on the mountain east of Jerusalem. What mountain is that? That's the Mount of Olives. And it's almost as if God paused there, looked back at the city, and grieved at what he was doing, what he had to do, because he's a holy God, and these people were rebelling against him. And it reminds me of when Yeshua was coming from Bethany over the Mount of Olives and into Jerusalem, and he stopped and he looked at Jerusalem and he wept he said, how often I would have put you under my wings. So he grieved, and the Father grieved at that. So this idea that God's a mean and an ugly and nasty God it's false. He grieves at the sins of the people. And so anyway, Ezekiel then is carried back to the Chebar River, and he tells the elders what he saw. And then that is the end of it for tonight. Now, what I do have is my good friend Rich Withers, with whom I attended the Coast Guard Academy 100 years ago. He prepared a little thing on the faces, and here is his actually it's a summary, and so we're really way over time, but I'm going to let him kind of do a few words on that. If you can keep it brief there, Rich, or we can do it another time, but I'd like to go ahead and get the faces here because we won't see that again. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. So I sent to Rabbi Sheik 5 one-page pieces that talk about the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle. What you see there is the summary table. The other four pieces go into great detail on each of the four. And so if Rabbi Sheik likes what he reads, you're certainly free to pass it on to your congregants.
Okay, what I will do, Rich, I will, for our class here, I will download all of those 5 documents and send them back out to everyone, the same email address that I use for everyone to invite them to the class. I will go ahead and put that into a separate email back to everyone, giving them this information so that they can look at it. Because it was a good summary of what those things represented.
And they tie right into the New Testament and the gospel of Christ.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and send all those things. And I thank Rich for jumping in there. I mean, he hadn't been with us but a couple of weeks, but he's getting right into the spirit of things here, and so we appreciate him doing that. So that'd be good. I can go ahead and send those out tonight before I hit the pit. So good. Thanks, Rich. Are there any comments or questions that anyone might have over this lesson? Wow. Okay. Well, is there anybody still awake out there? Okay.
Yes, well, I was looking at on a verse 21 where it says, but for those whose hearts pursue their desires for detestable things. So I guess some of those that came back were still, they didn't learn their lesson.
No, I think what he's talking about there, Carmen, is the people there who are still in Jerusalem at that time.
Okay.
And anyone after that, and you could, I could see where you would say that too, but that basically he's saying that if you're going to be following those your baser nature, as it were, then you're going to suffer the consequences of that,
right?
Because the law is very specific about that.
Right.
That you have to, if you're going to do these things, then these are the curses that will follow those that disobey the law. He's very, very clear about that. So they had no one to blame but themselves.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the teaching.
You're quite welcome.
Oh, Rabbi,
Yes, sir.
make a comment on verse 19, where the Lord says, I will put a new spirit within them and will take out the stony heart.
Mm-hmm.
You probably already know this, but that taking out the heart of stone, the stony heart, is a Hebrew idiom where the Lord is basically saying, I will turn off the self-life that wants to build up something for itself or make a name or reputation for itself. So it all has to deal with the self-life, and the Lord wants us to replace that self-life with being Christ-centered.
There you go. And it also that ties in with the idea of the circumcision of the heart. Which,
absolutely.
So that good point on that. So
okay,
real good. Any other comments and questions? So we're just about to shut it down here for the evening, and I'm going to go ahead and close off the live stream. Shavua Tov, everyone.